hi, everybody. Welcome to Fresh Outlook.
Right.
I am TWB. Welcome back, I should say. Last week, a security firm released a report alleging that Chinese hackers are behind cyber attacks in over 100 companies and government agencies across the globe. How serious is it? And do we find ourselves in a cyber Cold War? That is a very good question. Let's take a look.
A private technology security firm has accused a Chinese military unit of hacking into 141 American businesses.
Victim companies were compromised. They hired us. We followed the technical threads, and it led us to a region in Shanghai. All the evidence technically pointed to a region in Shanghai. Publicly available documents led us to the unit in the PLA, led us to the location. Are they really unaware of at least 141 companies being compromised nearly 2,000 times in the last 2 years alone, right under their noses?
China has squarely denied the accusation.
The Chinese army has never supported any hacking activity. Statements about the Chinese army engaging in cyber attacks are unprofessional and not in line with facts.
The U.S. government has detailed information on the hacking, but it's regarded as highly classified. Being a private company, Mondiant doesn't have to keep its information secret. The company says it's time to call out China for its systematic hacking.
I think APT1 is just one of many groups. So extending it to the whole problem, I believe the next big story is going to be when we start gauging the impact of all these intrusions. How many jobs did we lose in this country because we lost our IP for 10 years? How many companies that do manufacturing, but their cost of goods sold is higher than what you can produce it for in China, and now we've lost that based on losing our innovation in IP.
Cybersecurity, it's a hot topic in light of this report. Want to welcome back our panel. We have a new guest joining us. Franz, tell us who you are, where you're from, and why you decided to join us.
Yes, I'm Franz Stefan Gady. I'm a senior fellow at the East-West Institute, and I've been looking at these issues for a couple of years now. I'm originally from Austria.
Terrific. Well, welcome, welcome, welcome. So let's get into it, panel. How serious is this threat? Is it exaggerated? Is this a proverbial, cyber 9/11 that we need to prevent? Who wants to start? Franz, you're new. What do you have to say?
Sure. First of all, I do think that this particular incident has been exaggerated in the media. This stuff has been happening for a couple of years now.
Why do you think it's exaggerated?
Because, as I said, it has happened, and these sorts of intrusions happen on a daily basis. We don't really know exactly how much damage they have done. These sort of attacks have caused, in general, I think the major issue here is not so much cyber espionage itself. It is actually how these sort of things are affecting the relations between the United States and China on some other issues. And I think one has to understand that the acronym that they used is APT1 for these sort of attacks, the security firm, which means Advanced Persistent Threat 1. Well, we should not forget that Advanced Persistent Threat 0 has been actually the United States. That's why there will be actually, I think, very little diplomatic repercussions between the two, because this whole business of cyber espionage actually reminds me of the title of the Mozart opera, Così fan tutti, thus do they all. Everyone is engaged in this sort of activities, and they will remain engaged in these activities, and there's very little that states can do. The major problem, though, I think, is that the major question U.S. foreign policymakers and this administration has to ask itself is whether these sort of intellectual property thefts weaken United States power.
Right, and that's what we want. That's really what we want to get to. How big of a threat is this, and should we be worried? I want to introduce another member of the panel via Skype. We should have David Opderbeck joining us, professor of law at Seton Hall. David, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
All right, chime in. What do you think? Should we be worried, and what kind of threat does this really pose, if so?
I do think we should be worried, and I think the more important aspect of the threat is the problem of intrusions into what we call critical information infrastructure. It's been shown that, for example, our power grids can be vulnerable. It's been shown that our water plants can be vulnerable. You wouldn't think so, but all of these things are in various ways controlled by technologies that are vulnerable to cyber attacks. And so it is a real concern, and there are some real threats we have to think about.
Right. I mean, just undermining national security. Does it put the U.S. economy in jeopardy? Dee Dee, do you agree?
Oh,
how significant is this?
I think it's very significant. This should be #1. And in fact, our federal government, that is the #1 job, to protect us. So we should look at it as a Cold War. We should be prepared. We should make absolutely sure that if something goes down, that we're ready for it. You know,
hasn't this been going on for like 15 years? Well, and all of a sudden we're talking about
well,
it?
You know, we could have another 9/11. There could be something that happen where everything shuts down, and then what happens to our country? That is not good. So we need to, you know, hope for the best, but expect the worst, and be prepared.
Right. I mean, they're saying like they infiltrate our power grids, our water systems.
A disaster.
I mean, it really goes on.
If I could just say one thing, the major question I think one has to ask: what sort of advantage would the Chinese have from actually infiltrating these sort of systems? Because at the end of the day, both the economies of both the United States and China are so interconnected with each other, and especially the critical information
It could be crazy people. It doesn't even mean it's the government.
So are they gaining any advantages?
Right, but we are specifically talking here, think about state-sponsored attacks. I think the major issue, and thank you for bringing this up, is actually how do we actually combat cyber criminals, cyber terrorists, and I think these are actually issues where the Chinese, where the People's Republic of China and the United States should actually cooperate. One of the ideas actually that I've been working on for a while is a joint study of the interdependence between the United States and Chinese critical information infrastructure, just to outline actually how interdependent both of these countries are. I do think that the Cold War
but they're threatening us. I mean,
but the counter question would be, in what way are we threatening them? Because you have to understand. Well, I think the Cyber Command, the increase in cyber warriors in the United States, and also the official policy of the United States for information dominance, sort of is threatening.
Well, we're
China.
not here to protect China. Okay, we're here
but I agree with you that we have become much more interdependent, and that is the world of globalization we live in. But I think there's a number of people who are very concerned, right, that the sort of the weights or the sort of level of importance or the strength of that relationship is shifting from being more U.S. to more China, and so now if you have these attacks going on, right, you then start to undermine basically the sort of competitive advantage, the intellectual property rights that let's say U.S. firms or now multinational firms have,
David?
and that eats away at profit.
With that, I just want to bring in David for a moment, because you can speak to a little bit about the legal perspective here in terms of international law. What do you say?
Correct, and I think it's important in some ways to separate out intellectual property from security issues.
Very important distinction, yeah.
Right. Intellectual property could be privately owned, and there are laws that govern that, and they could be strong enough or not strong enough. But I think the bigger concern is preparedness in the event of some sort of major incident. And by the way, it doesn't have to be China. It could be a terrorist incident. It could be Russian organized crime. There are lots of nefarious groups using these technologies. And so we need preparedness plans. We need standards that critical infrastructure providers ought to adhere to. And I think we really need clear guidelines for what the government and especially the executive branch can and can't do in the event of an emergency. Just like if there's a hurricane, we have to decide how long those authorities last and what they are. We need the same sort of delineation with respect to cybersecurity.
Preparedness.
And
David.
that's something we don't have yet.
David, I want to thank you for joining us. David Opderbeck, Professor of Law at Seton Hall. Thank you for joining us. Do we have time for final thoughts from the panel? Voices in my head? Yes or no? Very quick, real quickly, Dee Dee, final thought.
We have to have protection and make sure that no one can break through our cyber wall. So it is a cyber Cold War.
Okay, maybe we need more insulation around the wall.
We do.
Maybe some pipelining. Franz?
I think that the government can actually do very little when it comes to cybersecurity overall, because 90% of critical information infrastructure is in the hands of the private sector. So all initiatives have to be private sector led, in my opinion.
So not government led.
Not government led.
Interesting.
Yes.
Okay, we didn't even get into that.
Today with the segments, what I found so fascinating that really connects all of them is this issue around sort of personal responsibility, but also around sort of intellectual property rights.
Sure.
But and then where does the government and where does public policy fit into all that?
My final thoughts, I think we need to focus more on our defense of these cyber attacks as opposed to the offensive by them. Also, it'll be interesting to see what Congress does. Sort of Obama in his State of the Union mentioned this, the legislation that needs to be enacted. So curious to see what happens. Hopefully we'll be talking about it in the weeks to come. Thank you, panel. It's been fresh. To say the least. We're out of time. I want to thank my all-star panel for their fresh outlooks. Of course, if you have a fresh outlook, of course we want to hear about it. Let us know on our Facebook page, also our Twitter page. That's @AbreWTV, #FreshOutlook. I'm TWB, or in the Twitterverse @TWBrill. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time on Fresh Outlook.